With interactive projects, one of the things that's really key is that because of their complexity, that it's essentially a product development process, there's a lot of professionals who are involved in making the app, right? If you went through YouTube and looked at that app, right? YouTube is a multi-billion-dollar company. Hundreds of people work on the product. The app is a key delivery mechanism for that company, right? So it's not just a couple of developers and a designer in the back room throwing this stuff together. There's a lot of highly skilled people working together to make this thing happen. For our project, right, we're going to talk about these 4 roles: the project manager, the art director, the UX strategist, and the presentation designer. One person from each of your team will play the role of one of these individuals. Now, everybody on the team is going to do all the steps in the project. What these roles mean is, in working on a team project, at some point, it's often best for one person to be the final check or the last pair of hands that any deliverable goes through. The project manager, right, may be the one setting up the meetings or sort of keeping an eye on the schedule, making sure everybody's doing their part. But everybody is responsible for knowing what the deadlines are, knowing what's due, and delivering their stuff in a timely manner. The art director will, be responsible for the look and feel, but everybody's going to develop their own look and feel. You're going to work together to finalize your final direction. And then the art director will be responsible for making sure that the assets that everybody is using, right, are consistent. And when the final goes together, they'll be the last check to make sure everything is lined up right, everything's using the right color, everything's using the right typeface. Okay. UX strategist, same type of role on the UX design, making sure all the sections are in place, doing the wireframes, the prototyping, and finally the presentation designer, laying it all out, putting it all together. So as you go through the project, you're collecting your work, right? You're developing the case study, you're putting in all the pieces, everything is formatted, it looks good, and then it can be presented for your group. But like I said, everybody's going to work on all the pieces. So just because one person will be the last handoff doesn't mean nobody else works on those items. As designers, right, our main focus would be UX, or user experience. And the user experience, right, works closer to the beginning of the project, right, and sometimes does some implementation. Right, you can see here along the bottom, sort of the rough 4 phases: research, synthesis and ideation, prototyping and design, and implementation. And then these various titles indicate what sections of those 4 phases these job titles often cover, right? So the unicorn can design and implement. It carries well into implementation. So lots of technical skills, but plenty of design skills, can do beginning to end. The UX engineer, sort of a higher end version of the unicorn, is better, has more experience with research, right? The unicorn is a little light on that. But as an engineer, goes further in the implementation, can really get down into the code and implementation, right? As a result, it's got the longest line. These are the best paid professionals in the industry. Increasingly, companies like Google and Apple and Microsoft want to hire UX engineers and are looking for people who cover the whole range. The UX team of 1, this happens primarily in small companies and startups, and companies that are don't have a full team. So the UX designer kind of covers everything from the very beginning of research to the prototyping and the design, but they normally don't do any implementation. At this point, they hand off all their design work to developers. UX designer is a little less than the team of 1 because they don't normally do as much research. If there's a UX designer and a UX researcher, the researcher will often do the survey questions and the eye tracking and the user interviews and sort of develop all the information that then the UX designer works with to do the design. The web designer, right? Web designer is not really, doesn't need to really be involved often in the research and the synthesis and the ideation. Very often it's decided what they want to have happen, and they bring the web designer in and says, okay, we've got our, desire list. Here's, we want to build a website that has blah. Here's our content. Here's our photos. Let's get going, right? So they'll do prototyping, design, and implementation to their skill set. The UI designer, right? The interface designer, again, isn't involved much in the research, right? And maybe in the synthesis and ideation, like once the UX designer kind of has a plan on how things are going to go, the UI designer can be brought in to really refine the interfaces and the look and feel. The interaction designer, again, making sure that all the flows work, right? All the behavior happens the way we need to see it, all that type of, those type of processes. Visual designer, right? All the thinking, all the plan, all the figuring out of what it's going to do. That's all decided. It's just about what it looks like, right? Are we going to apply our brand standards? What kind of illustration are we doing? Typeface, color, layout. Again, more specialized. And then lastly down here, right? We've got these two, the UX researcher and the front end developer. Again, the larger the project, the more of these roles people be in the team. But UX research, just doing the survey questions, just doing the user interviews, observations, and analytics, all that research can be handled by someone who just does research and doesn't really design at all, right? Their synthesis and ideation, they come up with, based on that research, what would be a good way forward, what would be a good plan. But they don't actually make that stuff, right? They hand it off to other professionals in the flow. And then the front-end developer. Again, this is implementation, a technical process, and a professional. Again, as a designer or UX designer, right, you can see it's pretty close. You would normally hand off to the front-end developer, right? There are also back-end developers, but that's really into the programming and, not anything you would normally be involved in. You may need to know about it just to talk to them, but nothing we would cover. Okay, so to the next. Generative research. One of the big differences between interactive work and graphic design is graphic design is often a well-known problem that we're given, right? We're going to design a book cover. We don't have to write the book. The author wrote the book. We're going to design a magazine spread. Again, we didn't write the magazine spread. We didn't think of the magazine. It's given to us. What we have to do is give it visual form. Interactive design, often we have to come up with what it is we're going to build. Like, what is it we're trying to make? Why are we trying to do this thing? What's the experience we want people to have, right? What's the difference between our imagined experience and the real experience, right? And I use this photo down here to kind of speak to that difference, right? If you want to go to the Louvre in Paris and see the Mona Lisa, when you get there, it'll be behind bulletproof glass, right? And then this big sort of deck barrier, and then there's this railing that you see sort of, blocks out. And then they've got people up here to make sure no one loses their mind and jumps the rail. And then there's a throng of people, right? And everybody is just taking pictures of the Mona Lisa with their phones to prove that they were there. This does not look like any kind of experience of looking at a painting that I want to have. So I'll be skipping seeing the Mona Lisa in person. But it's, I think this is really instructive to say, you imagine going to see a famous painting, and rather than being able to really look at the painting, you kind of have to go through this melee. Our idea of what the use will be like and what it actually is like is something we need to identify and make sure we really understand. Generative research, just as a subject, right, deeply generates an understanding of who your customers are as humans, not as users, and what they experience in their everyday lives, right? So many of your ideas that you've already started take advantage of your own knowledge of yourselves as customers, as humans, right? Like, something you want to do, something you want to see done, a situation that you're stuck in that you want to improve and see improved, right? That really is understanding yourselves as humans and not just as users. And what your experience and how you can then design to improve it. So how do we do generative research, right? We take photos or videos of users in the space, and my language will really talk about an activity in a physical space. Any activity you're doing, some of these may not be 100% applicable, but your users are trying to accomplish something. If you're doing any kind of location-based, you should absolutely see if you can get to the location and photograph what do people experience. What does the front door look like? Are there wayfinding signs? Are there directions? Are there maps? Are there brochures that people can get? Possibly look for volunteers you can find using the location, right? Or trying to accomplish the activity or do the thing your app is going to be designed to do, right? Understand how those people do it now. How do they decide that they're going to do something? Talk to people who use the services at your location. So as to watching them, ask them, how is it? What do you like? What do you not like? What do you have trouble doing? What do you like doing? What works really well? What doesn't work at all? What would you like to see different? And then we're going to develop a survey, and then you create interview questions based on your initial findings, right? And these questions are intended to validate, right, and uncover anything that you find. If you talk to a couple of people and they say, "Oh, it's really hard, to sign up." Is everybody feel the same way, right? Or do you just bump into a couple of people who are unhappy? And how unhappy are they? And are they unhappy with specific things, right? Now, more on the questions, right? Do they like using the services? Do they find it easy, hard? What problems do they encounter? What needs are not being met? Right? All of these are prompts for the types of questions you can ask. So here are some elements, right, that you would find if you went and did a site location visit at the MoMA, right, the Museum of Modern Art in New York City, right? Here's what the front door looks like going in. When you get in, there's this map explaining where the floors are and where the galleries are. Just another view of the map, the galleries themselves. How are people acting in this space, right? Who's using their phone to take pictures, getting the close-up, right? Seeing the art displayed. There's an audio tour, right? So you can get the audio tour on your phone and walk around with the directions and watch it and listen. Different languages, right? So all the information is available in multiple languages. Or again, all your audience may not be English speakers in New York City. So, and finally, right, signage where to check your coat and hang your stuff. So understanding all of these activities, right, that when someone goes to visit the museum could be useful in designing an app that would encourage people to visit the museum and then help them through the experience of using it. User personas. All right, we're going to create some user personas. Think about who your target audience is going to be. And again, these are imaginary people, right? They shouldn't be real people. You can Google around and find some formats, see which ones work for you. You can use either of these, that's fine. Pretty much everybody seems to use this pink one on the left. No doubt because I use it as an example. Everybody says, oh, that must be the right one to use. I'll just use that one. But whatever you do, right, make sure you cover this stuff, right? Their demographics, psychographics. Demographics is like their age, and psychographic are the kinds of things that they like, their psychology, what they like to do, how they see themselves. Lifestyle info, how do they like to spend their time? Where do they like to shop? What do they do for fun? Goals, frustration, needs, and desires, right? And these are definitely in relation to your app subject area, right? Whatever it is. So if they're trying to use a location, what are they trying to do in that location? What is hard? What do they need to accomplish? What would they like it to be like? All right. So once you've done all that research, you've written the survey questions, you've sent the survey out, you've gotten some answers, you've evaluated your own, you've looked at the competitive analysis of other apps, figured out what features, right, you've thought about, made a list of what kind of things you want to do. Now we're going to start to analyze this research, right? So you organize your photos, make sure you understand what you're looking at. You can narrate, put notes on a video if you filmed a video, write up as many specific things you noticed about the location. You're really just trying to remember all the information that you've identified for your subject area, right? You're going to create your personas. Once you write up your stuff, we're going to turn it into post-its and group your post-its. This is going to be called an affinity diagram. I'll talk about that more in the next video. Okay. All right. Okay, so that's it. That's our research phase. So go ahead and get started on that, and I will see you in the next video.